Before you pour another bowl of cereal tomorrow morning, you need to hear what may be hiding inside some of the UK's most trusted breakfast brands. Behind colourful boxes, smiling mascots, and balanced breakfast slogans, several popular cereals contain heavy levels of sweetness and highly processed ingredients that nutrition researchers warn may be worth a closer look when eaten regularly. So in this video, we're looking at ingredient lists, nutritional profiles, and independent insights to reveal what goes into millions of bowls before work, school, workouts, or weekend routines. Because whether you're a parent preparing for the school run, a senior watching your energy and balance, or a teen grabbing a quick breakfast boost, knowing what actually lands in your bowl may matter far more than most people realize. And one cereal on this list is widely viewed as a healthy option, yet it contains something so debated. 8. Kellogg's Frosties. Frosties is one of the most recognizable cereals in the UK, wrapped in nostalgia, childhood memories, and a familiar sense of comfort. With its bright blue box, friendly tiger mascot, and the classic "They're great" slogan, it presents itself as fun, familiar, and energizing. Many parents buy it for children as a quick breakfast that makes school mornings easier, while plenty of adults still eat it out of habit. Because the cereal is made from cornflakes rather than thick fillings or heavy coatings, it can seem deceptively simple, just grains with flavor. And that look of simplicity often leads shoppers to assume that it's essentially harmless as long as portions stay small. A closer look at its nutritional details, however, is where concerns begin to appear. Much of Frosty's flavor comes from added sweetness that creates the light glaze on every flake. Various general dietary discussions in the UK have raised caution about starting mornings with foods that rely heavily on sweetening agents due to how they can influence appetite patterns, energy steadiness, and overall nutrition choices across the day. When cereals lean heavily on added sweetness for taste, it becomes surprisingly easy to eat more than intended, especially for children and teens who are naturally drawn to the taste. And while Frosties certainly isn't unique in using sweetness to create its familiar flavor, it's often noted for being particularly pronounced. For families and adults who are trying to build steadier breakfast habits, beginning the day with a cereal high in added sweetness may contribute to sharper drops in energy later on, along with stronger cravings for more sweet foods. For people monitoring weight, energy, balance, or overall diet patterns, this kind of breakfast can make it harder to stay comfortably satisfied throughout the day without reaching for extra snacks. And because breakfast cereals are often seen as everyday staples rather than occasional treats, the ingredients and nutritional patterns can build up over time in ways most households don't consciously track. Frosties is why so many conversations around breakfast choices include reminders to read ingredient lists carefully, understand how servings add up, and think about what's being eaten regularly rather than just occasionally. And if sweetness is the only thing you're worried about, wait until you see number 7, because it's shaped like biscuits and carries even more concerns than most shoppers expect. 7. Nestle Cookie Crisp. Cookie Crisp is one of those cereals that seems designed to spark joy just by looking at it. With its cartoon mascot, biscuit-shaped pieces, and playful branding, it presents itself as a fun, light-hearted breakfast that feels more like a treat than a chore. Many families see it as an acceptable compromise, something that looks indulgent but is still just cereal, which creates a sense of safety and normality. And because it sits on the same shelves as everyday staples, it can easily blend in with the expectation that it's fine for regular use, especially in smaller bowls. Where concerns enter the conversation is in the way Cookie Crisp achieves its flavor and texture. Its biscuit-like pieces rely on a combination of sweetness, flavor agents, and processed elements that help form their crunch and taste profile. Discussions around ultra-processed foods often note that when cereals become more complex in how they're engineered, especially those styled after desserts, they can contain ingredient combinations that are harder for shoppers to evaluate at a glance. Cookie Crisp isn't unusual for using flavor enhancers or texture-supporting components, but it does sit on the more indulgent end of the cereal spectrum, where sweetness and processed structure become central to how it's made, rather than just a minor accent. For viewers who try to keep breakfast balanced, especially parents, learners, or people aiming for steadier appetite rhythms, starting the day with a cereal designed to mimic biscuits can sometimes work against the feeling of slow, even energy. When cereals lean on dessert-like taste, they can encourage the palate towards sweeter cravings throughout the day, which can make it harder to lean on fruit, grains, or proteins later on without feeling the tug of something more sugary. And because breakfast is often a daily ritual, even small ingredient choices can gradually shape routines, expectations, and preference patterns over time. Cookie Crisp often becomes a reminder that cereals inspired by sweets may be better suited as occasional picks rather than automatic morning go-tos. But if biscuit-shaped cereal raises eyebrows, the next one might be even more surprising, because it's marketed as a wholesome grain, yet its chocolate chip twist changes the story in ways many shoppers never notice. 6. Weetabix Minis. Weetabix has long been associated with wholesomeness, simplicity, and traditional UK breakfast culture. The original version is known for its straightforward ingredients, gentle flavour, and reputation as a grain-focused option that fits neatly into balanced routines. Because of that heritage, the Minis range benefits from the same reputation, and the chocolate chip variety often slips into shopping baskets under the assumption that it's just a slightly more exciting version of something fundamentally healthy. With the word whole grain printed clearly and the Weetabix name attached, many shoppers assume they're making a sensible morning choice. Where the difference becomes noticeable is in what has to be added to transform the original Weetabix formula into the chocolate chip variation. To create the sweetness, flavor, and texture that sets Minis apart, the cereal incorporates additional sweetening elements and processed components that shift it closer to the snack-like end of the breakfast spectrum. When cereals begin moving away from the minimally processed feel of their original forms, they often take on ingredients meant to heighten taste and crunch. This isn't unique to Weetabix Minis, but it does create a contrast from what people expect based on the brand's simpler core product. For families who rely on the idea of Weetabix as a reliably modest start to the day, the chocolate chip version can sometimes lead to a different breakfast experience than anticipated. Morning meals that lean more heavily on sweetened or enhanced flavors can encourage stronger flavor cravings, make it easier to pour larger portions, or shift the sense of what normal breakfast cereal tastes like. For people trying to manage appetite, energy consistency, or balanced eating habits, this kind of shift can gradually influence how satisfying breakfast feels and what the body asks for later in the day. And because Minis still appear under the wider Weetabix banner, it's easy not to think about how much the formula has changed from the brand's simplest roots. If a cereal closely connected to one of the UK's most trusted breakfast names can look so different once chocolate and enhanced flavouring join the mix, wait until you see the next one, because it's even richer, smoother, and far more processed than most people ever realise. 5. Krave is one of the most tempting cereals on UK shelves. Its box promises a creamy chocolate centre wrapped in a crunchy outer shell, making breakfast feel more like a treat than a routine. Many shoppers see it as fun but harmless, and because it still sits in the cereal aisle rather than the confectionery section, it often feels safer than keeping actual sweets in the cupboard. The branding leans heavily on excitement, flavour, and indulgence, which can create the assumption that it's simply a more modern take on cereal, rather than something fundamentally different in how it's produced. The part that raises questions is how Krave achieves that chocolate-filled bite. The cereal pieces are formed through a combination of grain components, sweetening elements, refined oils, and flavouring blends that give their signature taste and smooth filling. The more complex and confection-styled a cereal becomes, the more processed it generally needs to be to hold its flavour, structure, and texture. This isn't a unique criticism of Krave alone. Any cereal that tastes noticeably like dessert usually requires some form of engineered enhancement, but Krave stands out for leaning heavily into that profile. Its creamy chocolate centre, which is what makes it so appealing, is also what shifts it far away from the simpler, grain-led identity that most people instinctively associate with a traditional breakfast bowl. For viewers who rely on breakfast to feel steady, calm, and satisfying, cereals with strong dessert-like traits can gradually influence cravings and taste expectations throughout the day. When flavor intensity is high, it can make naturally mild foods, fruits, oats, or whole grains, feel less appealing by comparison. And because Krave is easy to pour, enjoyable to snack on, and often served in larger handfuls, it can turn breakfast from something grounded and subtle into something closer to a sweet treat without feeling like one. This is why discussions around breakfast habits often highlight ingredient awareness and portion mindfulness when cereals take on more confection-style characteristics. And if you're still with me right now, you're the kind of viewer who actually cares what goes into everyday food. So take a second to like this video, subscribe for more investigative breakdowns, and help it reach others who might not look twice at their breakfast bowl. Because the closer we get to number 1, the more eye-opening these cereals become. And if chocolate-filled cereal sounds surprising, the next item is even more unexpected, because it's marketed as a light, simple classic that most families assume is one of the safest choices on the shelf. 4. Cheerios. Cheerios has an image that feels almost universally gentle. With its light texture, subtle flavor, and plain beige rings, it's often viewed as one of the simplest cereals you can choose. Many households buy it because it seems mild, neutral, and uncomplicated. Something that feels appropriate for children, teens, older adults, and anyone looking for a straightforward breakfast. Its branding leans into heart-friendly visuals, calm colors, and messages about balance, which naturally sets expectations that it sits near the safe end of the cereal aisle. For a lot of shoppers, Cheerios represents the idea of cereal at its most unassuming. But ingredient lists can sometimes tell a more layered story than a brand's packaging implies. Even cereals known for being lighter can contain additions meant to support flavor, crispness, preservation, and consistency. The surprise for some people is that the simplicity suggested by plain appearance doesn't always mean the formula is as minimal as it looks. And while Cheerios certainly isn't extreme in how it's made, it still includes sweetening, processing steps, and shaping techniques that many buyers never think twice about, largely because the cereal gives off such a mild, clean impression. When something visually reads as wholesome, it's easy not to look closer. For individuals who try to keep breakfast focused on steadiness, fiber, or gentle energy, particularly parents planning school day meals or older adults who like calmer morning starts, it can be helpful to read labels more closely and see how much of a cereal's flavor or structure comes from supportive additives rather than just grain alone. Everyday staples can influence eating patterns over time simply through repetition, and Cheerios is one of those cereals that gets poured regularly because it feels safe and familiar. That's why it often comes up in conversations about how even the simplest looking products can benefit from occasional ingredient awareness rather than being assumed to be ultra minimal by default. And if a cereal as plain as Cheerios can contain more behind the scenes than many people realize, the next item may be even more surprising because it takes sweetness, flavor, and visual appeal to a level that makes it one of the most instantly recognizable bowls in the UK. 3. Cocoa Pops. Few cereals are as iconic in the UK as Cocoa Pops. Their chocolatey colour, playful branding, and instantly recognisable flavour make them a childhood staple that many adults still enjoy. The way they turn milk brown feels fun, nostalgic, and harmless, which creates a sense that they're simply part of growing up. For families, Cocoa Pops can feel like the cereal equivalent of a Saturday morning cartoon, cheerful, familiar, and comforting. Because they're thinner and lighter than many indulgent cereals, they're often seen as a soft treat that doesn't seem excessive. Where a closer look becomes useful is in understanding how Cocoa Pops achieve that trademark chocolate taste. Sweetness, flavoring, and processing steps play a noticeable role in distinguishing them from grain-led cereals. Discussions in food awareness circles often note that when cereals prioritize flavor intensity, especially dessert-inspired profiles, they can shift further away from their simple grain foundations. For Cocoa Pops, the chocolate identity is central, not just an accent, and creating that identity typically involves ingredient choices and shaping processes designed to maintain both the signature taste and smooth color throughout every bite. For households who keep breakfast as a daily routine, cereals built around stronger flavors may gradually shape expectations about morning meals, especially for children who experience them during formative years. When sweetness and flavor concentration become norm-setting, milder foods can feel less appealing, which in turn can influence later food choices throughout the day. And because Cocoa Pops are easy to pour, nostalgic to eat, and associated with comfort, they can become an automatic default rather than an occasional pick. Over longer stretches of time, that kind of routine is why conversations around cereal often revolve around checking labels, balancing breakfast rotation, and being mindful of patterns we repeat without thinking. But if a chocolate cereal with a friendly mascot can look different once you peek behind the curtain, the next one is even more unexpected, because it's promoted as a cereal that supports health, balance, and active lifestyles. Yet its ingredient profile often surprises shoppers who look closely. 2. Special K Red Berries. Special K Red Berries is one of the most widely recognized healthy lifestyle cereals in the UK. Its packaging leans heavily on imagery of balance, lightness, and well-being, and many people associate it with goals like managing weight, staying energized, or feeling more organized about their morning habits. Because the cereal includes fruit pieces and a crisp, airy flake, it can register in the mind as a fresher, lighter option. Countless shoppers pick it up believing they're choosing something that aligns with careful eating, and the branding supports that assumption every step of the way. A closer read of its nutritional details can show a more layered picture. Like most cereals that aim for a lively sweet lift, Special K Red Berries uses flavor elements and sweetening ingredients to keep the taste appealing, especially around the fruit pieces. The crisp flakes that define the cereal's texture come from processing steps that shape and maintain their crunch and structure. None of this is unusual within the world of packaged cereals, especially those focused on distinct taste and presentation. But it does highlight the difference between a product's visual identity and the ingredient pathways that create it. When a cereal presents itself as health-focused, many buyers understandably assume that every part of it aligns with gentle, minimal formulation, an assumption that benefits from an occasional closer look. For people who select breakfast with the intention of feeling steady, supported, or nutritionally balanced, it can be useful to look closely at how sweetness, flavor concentration, and processing fit into the product's broader design. Patterns built around light cereals can feel encouraging on the surface, yet still reflect flavor and texture structures that rely on elements buyers may not expect to see in a health-oriented product. And because cereals, like Special K Red Berries, attract shoppers who think intentionally about meals, understanding the full picture can help ensure that the morning bowl genuinely fits the balance they're aiming for, rather than just the appearance of it. And if a cereal so closely tied to lifestyle branding can look different once the ingredient details are considered, wait until you see number 1, because it's one of the UK's most beloved staples, yet it carries a sweetness profile that surprises even long-time fans. 1. Crunchy Nut Corn Flakes. Crunchy Nut Corn Flakes has a place in countless UK kitchens. Its honey-glazed coating, golden colour, and instantly recognisable aroma make it feel like a comforting classic that belongs in any cupboard. Many buyers see it as a slightly sweeter twist on plain cornflakes, familiar, simple, and lighter than cereals built around chocolate or fillings. The brand's long history and cheerful image add to the sense that it's just a friendly, everyday cereal that fits easily into breakfast routines. Because it looks so similar to regular cornflakes, it's natural for shoppers to assume it differs only slightly, without any deeper change beyond flavour. Where closer awareness comes in is around how Crunchy Nut creates that distinct glaze. Its well-known sweetness profile comes from elements added to shape the cereal's taste, shine, and crunchy bite. Conversations about breakfast habits often point out that when cereals take on dessert-style qualities, even subtle ones, it's helpful to remember that flavour, texture, and glaze usually require some form of added enhancement. None of this makes Crunchy Nut unusual within the broader cereal market, but it does highlight the difference between what looks like a basic cornflake and the actual processes and ingredients that bring out that signature honey, sweet character. Because the cereal tastes so satisfying, it can be easy to pour generous servings or treat it as a daily staple without noticing how often it's being eaten. For people who look to breakfast as a calm, balanced, grounding point, especially before work, school, exercise, or anything requiring steady energy, cereals built around stronger sweetness can subtly shape appetite patterns through repetition. When mornings begin with more flavor intensity, it can influence what feels normal throughout the day, making softer tasting foods less appealing by comparison. And because Crunchy Nut feels so familiar and approachable, it can become the kind of cereal that's chosen automatically, without much label reading or reflection. That's why discussions around cereal habits often encourage people to think about serving sizes, rotation, or simply checking ingredients now and then, especially with products that lean more towards satisfying flavor profiles. And if Crunchy Nut shows anything, it's that even the friendliest and most familiar cereals can benefit from a second look, not out of alarm, but simply to stay mindful of the routines that shape our mornings over time. If there's one message to take away from this countdown, it's that even the most familiar breakfasts deserve an occasional closer look. None of these cereals are presented as villains, and for many people they're tied to childhood, comfort, and everyday routines. But as we've seen, packaging, nostalgia, and assumptions can sometimes make a product feel simpler than it really is. A glance at ingredient lists can reveal sweetening elements, flavor techniques, and processing steps that many shoppers never think to check. Not because anything is hidden behind closed doors, but because cereal has long been treated as the default breakfast we don't question. That's why awareness matters. Tiny choices add up over weeks, months, and years. And if breakfast is something you eat most days, it makes sense to pause now and then and ask, is this still the kind of start I'm aiming for? Swapping in calmer options, rotating cereals rather than repeating one daily, or pairing lighter bowls with fruit, yogurt, or whole grains can all shift the routine towards something more balanced. Sometimes just reading the label a little more closely is enough to make mornings feel more intentional. And remember, a favorite cereal doesn't need to disappear forever. Many people still enjoy these brands occasionally, simply with a clearer understanding of how often they're reaching for them. Balance isn't about perfection, it's about awareness. The more informed we are, the easier it becomes to notice patterns instead of drifting into them. Now I'd love to hear from you. Which cereal surprised you the most? Have you already been checking labels? Or did something in this video make you want to look closer for the first time? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your experience might help someone else think differently about their kitchen shelf. If you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to share it with a friend, a parent, or anyone who starts the day with a quick bowl before rushing out the door. And if you want more exposés like this, deep dives into everyday items that deserve a second look, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Thanks for watching.